I think we'll get started. We're already running behind a bit and stuff. I just want to make sure if the note takers are in the room, and I don't see either of them. Do you see? Guido and Nicole are. Get your pen ready. Okay, I have a feeling people will gradually trickle in and stuff. We've got quite a sort of packed schedule, and Max and I have already worked quite a bit to condense it down as much as possible, because we don't want to keep anybody from their lunch, but we do have quite a bit to get through. So I would like to get started. The program today, we're going to give an introduction to FAITAG, for those of you who don't know what it is. I already mentioned it briefly the other day in my introductory EUAC presentation. And then I'm going to give the overview of the teleost section, the teleost programs under FAITAG. And then I'll hand over to Max and Co, who will go through the Elasmobranch regional collection plan programs and the different reports for each of those ESBs. And then Dirk sent a abbreviated version of the C-Corps presentation last night to me. So I very kindly handed that over to Andrew, who's been away with Dirk on the C-Corps, and he's agreed to present that choral work. And then afterwards, we're going to have a bit of a discussion. But I also want to start out with a little bit of a discussion and hopefully a bit of volunteering from everybody. Last year, we discussed, actually 2 years ago, we started to discuss the fact that FAITAG as a tag is immense if we were actually covering all of the species in the remit of FAITAG. It stands for Fish and Aquatic Invertebrate Taxon Advisory Group. And if you compare it to other tags in the zoological world, that's huge. There's a tag for gibbons, for instance, with lots and lots of people involved. And there's how many gibbons? About 8 or something. And if we look at all the fish and all the aquatic invertebrates, there's no way that even if we had millions of volunteers that we could cover all those species. And we don't necessarily want to have programs for all of them. But what we have worked out, and this was in discussions with Heather, the previous chair, is that it would be nice to at least tear it apart a bit, because there are areas of interest even within the aquarium community, and there's areas that people are definitely not interested in. And so we discussed 5 different subgroups under the FAITAG, which seemed to make sense. The elasmobranchs, because there's a lot of elasmobranch specialists out there, the freshwater teleost and freshwater fish people, and then the marine teleost people. And then there's the coral heads. And then there's the other aquatic invertebrate people. So that's, people that are keeping jellies, maybe people that are particularly interested in crustaceans and so on. And that in itself could be split into a million different taxonomic sublevels, but we kind of lump them all in together for purposes of the time being anyway now. So the idea behind it, and this has been agreed, is that there will still be FAITAG for the time being, and ideally we would like to have co-chairs under each of those 5 different subgroups, with the aim that ultimately maybe one day they would become separate tags in their own right. And that way people could spend the specific time that each of those taxonomic subgroups deserves in developing the regional collection plans, in developing management programs, and developing in situ conservation and so forth. So kind of starting all of that splitting apart business, Max has been agreed to be the elasmobranch co-chair for me. And obviously Max has done loads of work, and he did the first ESB for fishes, started in 2007. So he's got all the experience, and we had a workshop in April, which he's going to talk about, and it was agreed by everybody there and subsequently agreed within EUAC and EASA that he would act as the co-chair specifically responsible for elasmobranchs. And the amount of work up till now within the FAITAG has been heavily based on elasmobranchs, so he's got quite a bit to talk about. But just now, I know not everybody's in here and stuff, I'd like to get a feel for, would anybody be interested in taking up any of these other subgroups leading in either freshwater teleosts, marine teleosts, corals, or other invertebrates? Is there any volunteers? Pete? Other inverts? Great, okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yeah. 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 I mean, this is one of the problems is there's, not everybody comes to this meeting, and there are lots of people out there that have huge amounts of expertise and interest in these subjects, and I realize that they're not always going to be at all the meetings, but I mean, it is really important that if somebody becomes the co-chair, that they do attend the meetings and they do communicate and they do get feedback from people, so it's absolutely essential. I'm not keen to be representing all of this taxa single-handedly with Max's support. We need to get more people kind of agreeing to take on stuff. So even if you don't want to answer, Tony? Freshwater. I was hoping you were going to raise your hand. Brilliant. Okay, that's great. Any others? Come on, 2 more going. Anyway, okay. Think about it and let us know. So today, I'm going to start off talking about the teleost programs, of which there are only 2. And those are the 2 European seahorse, Hippocampus gutulatus and Hippocampus hippocampus. And neither of those coordinators, that's Laura Castellano from Genoa and Olivia from IZVG, are here today, but they've both given me some input. And Olivia was at the EASA meeting in Edinburgh last month, and we had quite a bit of a discussion there. Unfortunately, there was only about 6 fish people in the FAITAG session there, so we were sort of infiltrated by mammal viewpoints. But we had a discussion about how well ESBs actually work for teleosts, and that's one thing I want to discuss with you being fish people here today. So I'm going to jump out of that for a minute. How do I? Where is it? Ah, there. Okay, so Laura sent this update on Hippocampus gutulatus, the long-snouted or spiny seahorse. She's been the stud book keeper or the ESB coordinator since 2010 when it was approved. She has been working hard to try and get this program together and to see what's possible for managing seahorses. I mean, how many people in this room keep this species in your collection? Okay, so there's a lot of people, but you'll see from her reports the number of participants is actually relatively small. And I mean, that is a big part of the problem. And both of these ESB keepers have reported this repeatedly to me, that they aren't getting the people that are keeping the animals participating in the program. And even if they've agreed to participate at some point in the beginning, they're not communicating the information. And it's really, really important, and Max and the other ESB keepers will attribute this as well. The only way these programs work is if people actually submit the data. Without that, they just become really, really weak. So we need more people involved and more people willing to do what's required. It's not that much work. She submitted this report, which I don't know how easy it is to see from back there. It's basically a breakdown of the status of the species in each of the member collections, people who've agreed to be involved. So it gives what the star is, the births, how many were wild caught, brought into the collection from the wild, how many were transferred within EASA institutions, in or out, transferred to non-EASA institutions, and number of deaths. And you can see there's about just under 150 individual animals recorded in this program, which is probably a very, very tiny percentage of what European collections are actually holding. So it would be nice to get, more people involved in this. This gives the sex ratio of the populations. In a lot of the stud books, this is quite important data, and Max will probably be able to expand on this when he talks about the elasmobranchs more. They need to have a good understanding of what sex ratios are and the demographics of the population in order to make very good management decisions about where animals should be moved and how they should be kept. I'm going to go quickly into the next species because Laura has been really, really good at, even though she's had very little participation from people, she's been very good at developing good record keeping and stuff from those small amounts of people and participation. Olivia's had an absolute nightmare with hippocampus. How many people in here keep that species? Okay, so slightly fewer, it looks like, but we know that there's a lot of holders out there. And she reported to me last year that there was only one institution that sent updated data to her. And that's a bit of a problem. And there are other issues with these. When these were agreed as ESBs, they were agreed in almost a kind of a test case, because seahorses have the attributes of many teleost fish in that they're very, very highly fecund. They can have thousands of babies at one time. And if you're a stud bookkeeper and you're trying to keep track of those animals, if you've got 1,000 babies being born every couple of weeks, and you can't identify them as individuals, it becomes a bit of a problem in terms of getting the information that you need, because you can't identify each individual animal and enter it into the stud book program. And she sort of toyed around with lots of different methods of data collection. And we had several discussions about this over the years. What is the best way? At what point do animals that are born enter into the managed population? It's not every, 5 million babies that are born in a given year that get put in there. So do we wait until after a 6-month period and those that have survived up to that point then officially get put into the program? Or do we wait a longer period or shorter period? And this is one thing that hasn't been worked out yet. And just from her own difficulties and Laura's as well of trying to get this data together, that's something that we as fish people need to decide, because it's actually really important for all of the managed programs. If we're going to develop any other ones for teleost in the future, we need to get this right. And with seahorses, it's slightly easier in some sense than other teleost fishes because you can manage them as pairs. So you could keep a male and a female separately, and you could potentially identify them either through necklace tags or other means of tagging them. And so in the stud book program, you can actually enter them in as individual animals, which has been done. But the rest, what happens after that, when you've got loads and loads of births, is what the issue comes to. But the ESB is more than just about, in the case of these animals, and probably for quite a few other ones in the future, not just about the population management side. There's other aspects of it, and that's solving husbandry problems, which are, for seahorses, still pretty significant. I mean, I've talked to quite a few different people individually about seahorses and asked how well they're breeding them, and some people go like, oh yeah, they're really easy. And then you start asking more and more questions about it, like how many people have actually closed the life cycle on either of these species? And by closing the life cycle, that's not just getting wild-caught parents into captivity, getting them to breed, and then their babies growing up and maturing and reproducing. It's the next stage. So those first generation that were born in captivity, are they producing young? Are they producing viable young in significant enough numbers to maintain our populations over time? And has anybody done that in here for either of these species on a regular basis? How often?
We managed to go to F6.
F6 with which species?
Which
Okay, and how large is the population now?
200, 300.
200 from how many founders originally?
8.
Okay, well, I'll talk to you in the break then, because you're the only one. We managed at Zetacell to get hippocampus to F2, but we had 2 individuals. And we had, I mean, many people in here received seahorses from us, from our F1 population, but we know that those animals which were born in 2010, they should be prime right now and be producing loads and loads of babies. We had 0 reproduction this year from them. We had a few failed attempts, but that's it. So we're not routinely doing this. I mean, congratulations on that, and we need to pick your brains on how to go about doing that. But the reality is that our populations in European aquariums are not sustainable at the moment. And certainly in the UK, they are a protected species, and we cannot collect them from the wild anymore. And I'm sure the situation is going to be the same in Europe in the future, not without very special permission. So we really need to get our act together with these. More people involved, more people contributing information, and reporting back to the stud bookkeepers when they're asked, because otherwise we risk, having these amazing animals in our collection. The other thing, as I wrap up on the seahorse talk, is we need more research into the nutrition and development, because some of the problems that have been repeatedly reported, particularly with gutulatus, is that at some point during their development, they're not getting the right nutritional profile in what we're feeding them. And Daniel gave a really good talk about this at the Seahorse Symposium in Chicago a couple of years ago on one aspect of it. But many people have reported this. Fran Otero, working in the Canary Islands, has reported that in Hippocampus gutulatus, after a year, 12 months to 14 months of age, which we've managed to get animals to, at Zetacell, he's reported that they stop having the ability to strike properly at prey. So they're tracking them. These are full-sized animals. They're tracking them, and they just cannot suck the food into their mouth. And he reported this to us in summer, and it was almost like he cursed us, because 2 weeks after he left, we started seeing the same problem in all of our animals. And they just got more and more and more emaciated. And there we thought, well, we're out of the woods with them. They're over a year old. And they got thinner and thinner to the point where, much to my disgust, we had to tube feed all of them just to try and stop them from starving to death. And that had minimal success. We managed to still we've got about 20 animals going, but they still have this problem, this difficulty in feeding. And his research has suggested that that's down to some nutritional deficiency at a very early stage in the life cycle, and it affects them that much further on. And this is just from having a conversation with him, but more of this collective data gathering by the ESB holders will obviously form common problems and stuff, and then we can collaboratively work, hopefully, with research to try and solve them. So we're still not there yet, and we do need to mobilize and work harder in order to have those sustainable populations in our collections. Does anybody have anything that they would like to add about seahorses or comment? Yeah, Paul?
No, Brian, I don't have anything to add because I don't keep seahorses at home. And it's a long time since I have seen them, or we bred them in the zoo in the early 60s, in a few generations, but that's history. But I wonder, when we started the FAITAG discussion in 1989 in Chester, we produced a manual, and then, of course, it's still updated, luckily, because it was largely outdated. Another question with regard to the seahorses, I know that Heather prepared or documented a husbandry manual. Mm-hmm. Is it still, it can be updated, I hope, and if possible, and is it somewhere available? If not, I can send it to Stefan to have put the manual as such on the website of EUAC.
Absolutely.
People could eventually, I don't know whether it is there already, but if not, there is, I have it on a CD disc. Okay. And it could be on the website of EUAC where everybody could give opinions, change things, and so on. I don't know. That's just what I wanted to ask you. There is a possibility to have it there and then updated.
That's great. Yeah.
I'm not saying that it has been read.
What year is that? Because it has been updated a couple of times.
The one I have is updated or not.
Okay.
It's a long time since uploaded.
The original one, specifically for the 2 European species, was there were only a couple of pages from that earlier document for each species. It was then added to quite a bit, and I think Robin, where is he? Is he in here? I think Robin James put a lot of extra information into that. And then at the Husbandry Symposium in Chicago, there was more information added. But yeah, it should definitely be on the website. And the other thing is within BIAZA in the UK, a very, very detailed husbandry manual was put together for hippocampus, and that was coordinated by Karen Toussaint. And a lot of us put in our information, so it's lots of different types of methodology that have worked and just examples of things that definitely didn't work for different institutions. And it's quite a hefty document, which we can certainly put together. But it needs work, and it needs more people, as you say, just feeding into it of their experiences, because even when Karen was trying to get input from people and contacting them directly and stuff, the information wasn't free-flowing, so it'd be great if more people get involved.
Maybe it's good to add there that I think on the website we also should put all the studbook overviews, and so all should come there, so every member can check it what the status, what the latest status is of every studbook. We will make sure all the information comes to.
So Taylor, have you already
all the information I got as Secretary General was
Yeah.
fed into the website.
Yeah, but we need to see if it's all updated.
But of course, if I don't get the latest updates, I can't forward them to Stefan.
No, the updates are from 2011. I would be happy to update that.
Yeah. Okay. The new ones will be on in 2 days.
All right, if there's no other seahorse talk, I'm going to hand over to Max. I don't know. Hope the rest of the slides aren't in whatever language that is.